So thank you. And so great to see you, Rachel. It's just been a
Great to
long
see
time.
you.
All right, onward, you two. Love you both.
You too.
Well, good morning, everyone. Here it's in California, at least it's morning. We're with people all over the world. So, whatever time zone you're in, we want to welcome you and say, express our gratitude for your joining us. And, we just want to start by saying hello, really, just hello. And I'm happy to be with my old friend Rachel. We've been taught together for 30 years, at least, I think. I don't know. But, both of us have this deep love of mystery, actually. But we come at it through different gateways, actually. And that's part of what's interesting and what I'm curious to see what happens today, as we both come toward this, in a way, unnameable experience through different gateways. So very happy to be with you. And Rachel, wow, I'm just glad. Thank you for coming and doing this together. And let's have fun playing. Yeah.
As always.
Yeah.
Yes. So you start.
All right. Well, you know, I think we are really aided in the journey through life and death by being open to mystery. Mystery that we're talking about today, it isn't about, those Agatha Christie novels that you read on the summer's beach, where the detective adds up all the clues and announces that the butler did it. That's not the kind of mystery we're talking about here. You know, and it's not just about some California woo experience. That's not the mystery we're speaking about. What I think we're going to try and explore together is something that we actually don't have adequate language to describe. It's a kind of the incomprehensible presence that we encounter sometimes in deep spiritual practice or around the time of dying or in the practice of medicine. And it's kind of difficult to name. And so we call it mystery. We call it mystery with a capital M. Yeah. And, in Zen, one of the gateways to that mystery is not knowing, something we often call don't know mind. Yeah. And don't know mind is, well, it's characterized with a kind of openness, right? A curiosity, a receptivity, sometimes a sense of wonder and awe. Suzuki Roshi famously said, in the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. In the expert's mind, there are few. So the mystery that Rachel and I want to discover with you, or explore with you, isn't about our limitation to understand. Mystery, as we think of it anyway, is intrinsic to reality. Reality is constantly unfolding. It's constantly showing itself. It's constantly manifesting. And it can't be determined, right? Because it's always occurring. And so what we can do though is discover. We can continuously discover. Now, to our small self, our conceptual self, the fact that mystery can't be solved, well, it's a kind of threat to our competency. We feel like a failure, right? Because we can't find the right answer. And when we're entering the unknown, like we are sometimes in the process of dying, we want to know what the right action is. But I think maybe Rachel will join me in this. I think that mystery isn't about taking action. It's more about opening. It's more about awe and wonder. So this not knowing that I'm speaking of, it's not a stance of ignorance. It's a quality of attention. It's a capacity to bear witness to that which can't be solved, but I think can be lived into. For me, at least, not knowing causes me to pay careful attention. And it brings forward a kind of acuity of attention to a situation or to an experience that I might not have brought to it when I think I know. So in experiences like giving birth or making love or being immersed in the beauty of nature or connecting with a great work of art, or sometimes something very simple like falling into the eyes of an infant, we often sense that we're looking into the vast unnameable. Everybody here, everybody on this call, I would bet, can recall some feeling of awe or a moment of wonder when your jaw just dropped, right? Maybe it was an encounter with unimaginable beauty, or maybe something quite ordinary. And when that happens for me, I feel this sense of reverence in its presence. And when that happens, sometimes the mind just stops and our consciousness rests. And, maybe we become absorbed in some kind of tranquility or humility. And I think our sense of tick-tock time changes in that moment. And we enter into something like that we could call the eternal now. And just I want to say a few more things that over the years, I found that what I can experience or know directly is much more important than my ability to explain it or measure it. The encounter with mystery, the encounter with life is pervaded with mystery, as is the experience of death. It can't be captured. But like listening to a really beautiful piece of music, we can give ourselves to it. We can give ourselves to mystery completely. And maybe when we do that, we find a different way of responding. Like, there's a story I've shared with some of you before that I just want to add here, which is one day I was at Zen Hospice. We had a unit in a big long-term care facility. And this particular facility had large open wards of, 20, 30 people to a room. And there were just beds along the wall. There's nothing like it this side of Calcutta, and I was walking down this gauntlet of beds, and there was this older African-American man there, and he was sweating and breathing with great difficulty, and I saw, this man's coming close to death. So I went over beside him and I sat down in a chair next to him, and I said to him, "You look like you're working really hard." Because that's what was going on. And he said, "Yeah." And then he pointed and he said, "I just got to get there." So I said to him, "I don't have my glasses. I can't see into the distance. Can you tell me what you see?" And he described a sloping hillside up to a kind of plateau. And I said, "You want to go?" And he said, "Yeah." And he grabbed my hand. And we started walking up this hillside together. And he was huffing and puffing and sweating. And when it was clear that we'd reached this plateau, I said, "Can you see further into the distance?" And he said, Yeah. I said, "What do you see?" I don't see it." And he described for me a little one-room red schoolhouse with 3 steps and a door. This is a man born in Mississippi in the southern part of the United States. And he probably went to such a school as a boy. Now, I could have said to him at this time, "You're in Laguna Honda Hospital," and try and orient him to time, space and time. That would have been the intervention that some people would have recommended. But that wasn't what was happening. What was happening was we were walking to a little red schoolhouse. And so I said, "There's the door. You want to go in?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Can I go with you?" And he said, "No." I said, "Okay, you go then." And a little while later, he died very peacefully. Mystery is a willingness to bear witness to what we can be with, but we can't always explain, you know. But something maybe that we can know directly, not through our cognitive process, but we can sense, we can feel, we can experience directly. And in my life, that has a kind of intimacy to it. But I want to hear from you, Rachel. I want to know what your experience is. And, you know, again, we come to this in different gateways. So I want to just hear from you, actually.
Yeah, we do come from different gateways. And let me just say, I love this media because usually when we have presented together, you know, we sit shoulder to shoulder. I can't see you.
Right.
And I love being able to see you when you talk. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. Yeah. So I mean, in the interest of full disclosure, I'm not a Buddhist of any kind. I'm not a Zen Buddhist. I have meditated probably exactly 5 minutes in my entire life. But I come at it from a somewhat different perspective. I'm a physician, and I'm an observer, and I'm a storyteller. And in order to be a storyteller, you have to be willing to witness. And the more you can witness and even disappear while you're witnessing, the better you get to know the story. So if I have a practice, my practice is the practice of story listening and storytelling. Right? And it seems to me that a story is only as good as your eyes are good. That we're really talking about the willingness to see, or the ability to see, not the ability to know. The cognitive mind is not the highest of human functions. I think the highest of human functions is probably witnessing. The ability to simply, without disturbing anything, be present and witness. And if you do that long enough, I'm 83 now, eventually it starts to form some coherency. And that's interesting. So a couple of quotes. The voyage of discovery lies not in seeking new vistas, but in having new eyes. That's really what we're talking about this morning. The voyage of discovery lies not in seeking new vistas, but in having new eyes. And then another quote, this is from a book called Small is Beautiful that was published about 1971. It's very old. Schumacher, the economist, right? He says, we can only see what we have grown an eye to see. We can only see what we have grown an eye to see. And that all the discussions about the nature of the world are not about the nature of the world, it's about the quality of our eyes that we are really discussing. The nature of the world is unchanging. So, mystery as a worldview. And it's an all or nothing kind of thing. You know, just knowing the instant you meet a total stranger, for example, that this is your life partner. This is something that actually happens to people, and it happens to a lot of people. They meet someone at a party, and as they see them for the first time, they recognize them. Right? An experience of mystery, something that occurs frequently or reasonably frequently. And that's as important in terms of understanding or knowing the nature of the world as getting up in the morning, going into the kitchen, finding an angel sitting at your kitchen counter, wings and all. Right? These are the same thing. So we're not looking for the angels. Sometimes they'll show up. What we're looking for is the clarity of vision to recognize that the living God is always dancing on our back. Yeah. So any person can experience mystery. You don't have to be special. Certainly don't have to be a meditator, because I'm not. Children experience mystery all the time, and we tell them, that didn't really happen, Johnny did it now. And what makes us so sure of that? Makes us so certain about that? I think the thing that I can do, rather than talk about mystery, is to share some stories. I brought a whole bunch of stories with me. So I thought I'd share a few, some simple ones, some ones that are a little more complicated. Because what mystery is an invitation to wonder together. You know, the cognitive mind doesn't wonder. The cognitive mind is interested in mastery, not mystery. It's interested in certainty, if possible. But wondering together may save the world, actually. The cognitive mind often gets us in a lot of trouble. So, such a simple thing. After my mother died, I kept seeing her in crowds. I mean, I'd be in a crowd, like, any kind of crowd, in a store, walking down a crowded street, at a ball game. I'd see my mother. But I was never able to hold on to that vision. I saw her for about a year, and then never again. And I was very surprised at how many people had that experience of seeing some beloved departed person in a crowd, and what it means to them, and what it means to them. So let me tell you a few stories that are a little more complicated than this. This is a story about a colleague. She was a very brilliant woman, very, very recognized for her intelligence. She was a full professor, an intellectual, and she was about to deliver her first child. And as her pregnancy neared the end, the time of delivery, as people around her became more and more excited about the baby and the birth, she became more and more anxious, and eventually became, frankly, terrified. She was a woman who had no physical dimension that she could identify. She didn't exercise, she didn't walk, she didn't run. She thought. That's what she did, right? And yet this was a very physical happening, and she was not in control of it. And this made her extremely anxious and feeling more and more alone as the people around her were becoming more and more excited about the birth. And when she awakened on the morning of the birth and had the first labor pain, she was terrified. But her husband was elated. He kissed her and ran downstairs to call her parents in the doctor's office and notify the hospital. And upstairs, she got out of bed and went into the bathroom and locked herself in. And she was shaking so hard she couldn't even stand up. So she sat on the toilet and she said to herself, I'm not going to be able to do this. I know I'm not going to be able to do this. I'm going to die here. And she began shaking uncontrollably and was filled with a feeling of dread. And suddenly, the room was filled with a smell. I mean, she could tell that it was a perfume. And the entire room was filled with this smell of perfume. And as she was breathing it, she became more and more calm. And the smell was familiar to her somewhere, but she wasn't quite sure where she had smelled it before. And suddenly she remembered. It was her grandmother's perfume. She used to smell it when her grandmother held her in her lap and hugged her and told her stories. And then she thought about her grandmother. grandmother was not an educated woman like she herself was. Her grandmother and her mother were both farm women. They were farm women. They were connected to the land. And her grandmother had been safely delivered of 11 children. She had given birth to 11 children. And her mother had given birth to 6 children. All of them had lived. And her mother had lived. And suddenly she realized that she couldn't do this, but her body could do this. Her body was the lineage offered by these other 2 very strong women. And suddenly she felt calm and filled with gratitude. When her husband knocked on the door and called out to her, "Are you ready?" She said, "Yes, I am." And she went to the hospital and delivered her son. And she told me that she smelled the perfume several times in the first year of his life, usually when he was sick, and then never again. She never smelled it again. And she has 3 children now. She also asked her husband if he had ever smelled the perfume, but he said he had not. He had never smelled it. Okay. That's a story of mystery. It's as ordinary as that. And sometimes a story of mystery isn't about our connections, it's about ourselves, something about our own nature that's revealed to us. And if I can tell you one more story before I ask Franco for some of his comments. I was invited to the monthly meeting of the residents in the Department of Internal Medicine at UCSF. And I was asked to come and give a talk by a friend of mine. And this is terrifying. These people are hotshots. They know so much. They know more medicine than they'll ever know again in their lives. They're at the end of a very intensive, very fine training, and they are cognitive. They're really cognitive. And I laughed at my friend who invited me and said, "Well, what could I talk about?" He says, "Anything you want, as long as it's cutting edge." I said, "What do you mean cutting edge?" He says, "Well, all the lecturers talk about the cutting edge of medicine." And I said, "Well, how would you feel if I talked about the cutting edge of life?" And he started to laugh and he said, "Sure." So I told him that I would do a 3-hour seminar on mystery. And he looked very dubious, but he agreed. So the evening, these were evening events. The evening I arrived, and there's a big room, and we are, that is my, there we go. I think we go. I arrive and it's full of young people, mostly men. And we mill around, we have dinner, lasagna, whatever they're serving everybody, and then we sit down. And I start by talking about mystery as an ordinary part of life. And I ask him to get out pencil and paper and to write, and a very ordinary part of medicine, that medicine is a front row seat on life. And of course, it's a front row seat on mystery as well. And they all look very dubious. And I ask you to pull out some paper and pen and write down and experience something they experienced in their work that happened, but they couldn't understand it. It was beyond their understanding. And how did they respond to it? And who did they tell about it? And lots of questions. So they sort of filled out this experience for themselves. And then we shared. We started sharing. And when I asked for the sharing, it was first a big silence. And then somebody shared a story. And then somebody else shared a story. And then it was 2 hours later, and we were still sharing stories, most of which had never been told before to any other person, maybe someone's wife or so, but certainly not to another doctor. And we were getting close to the end of the meeting. And in the meeting with all these young people, they're all wearing whites. This is a number of years ago. So they're all dressed in white. They're intimidating, very intimidating. There are also 3 older men, and they're wearing suits. And I figured, oh, they're faculty from the internal medicine department, which indeed they were. And I say, you know, we have time for just one more story on anybody. And one of these gray-haired men raises their hand. And I say, call on, right? And he says that the story he wants to tell happened when he was a freshman in college and his younger brother died of leukemia. And he said that as his brother was dying, he was an engineering student. He didn't want any part of this. And he didn't come home. And finally, his parents said that he had to come home because his brother was very near death and he was dying at home and they needed his support. So he didn't really want to go, but he went. And when he got there, this, you know, this post-adolescent young man, he didn't know what to do with him. I mean, he just was getting in the way. And finally, his mother suggested to him that he sit and read to his brother, sit next to his brother's bed and just read to him. His brother hadn't been conscious in a week. His brother was unconscious in bed. So he went and got some books from the family library. And he goes and he sits right next to his bed and he looks at his brother. His brother appears to be in a deep sleep. And he starts to read. And he reads 5 and 6 hours a day, one after the other, one after the other. And the third day of reading nonstop, almost all the waking hours of the day to his brother, as he's reading, suddenly he feels a touch on his hand, on his shoulder. And he looks over and his brother's wide awake. His eyes are open. And his brother looks at him and says, George, look. There's someone there. Someone has come for us, George. And his brother's looking at a blank wall in the bedroom. He says, can you see him, George? So George closes the book and he looks at the wall and can't see a thing, but he can feel it. There is something there with them in the room. There's a presence. And the light in the room has changed in some funny way. It's sort of yellowish. And suddenly he knew that he was supposed to become a doctor. And so after his brother died, he went back to school and he changed his major. He resigned from engineering and started to prepare for medical school. And I was hoping he would say something more, but there was nothing more to say. That was it. So I thanked him for the story. I thanked them all for their stories. And we called the meeting to an end. And after the meeting was over, we all stood up and walked around for a bit. And I went up to this man and I thanked him for telling this story to this audience. And I said, that was a brave thing to do, you know. And he said, as he looked away, he said, well, that's not exactly what happened. My heart sank. And I said, so what happened? He said, well, it wasn't that I knew I was supposed to become a doctor, Rachel. What I knew is that I was a doctor. I had always been a doctor. I had been a doctor from years beyond counting. I'd been born with a doctor's soul in me. And for some reason, I was suddenly able to remember. I think mystery is a more ordinary form of life than we know. I'll tell you one more quick medical story. I've been gathering up groups of doctors and talking about other dimensions of our experience that we rarely discuss like this for a long, long time. In one of the very first groups, a cardiologist told this story. He was about 17 or 15, his brother was 17. And at that point, his father had Alzheimer's disease for about 10 years. He was a walking vegetable. And his mother tended him with great devotion. But when her boys got to be older, sometimes on a Sunday when they were watching football, she'd leave her husband sitting inert in a chair. He wasn't able to speak. He couldn't even feed himself or dress himself. She'd leave him in a chair in the living room with his sons. And then she'd go out and have a cup of tea with a friend. Right? And that was one of these times. They were watching football on the television. And way in the back of the living room, there's the father sitting in a chair, just inert, right? And as they're watching, suddenly they hear a sound, a very odd sound, and they both turn to their dad, and they see he's clutching his chest. And as they watch, he falls forward out of the chair onto the rug. And both the sons run to him and say, "Oh my God, Dad, Dad." And the person telling this story, Mark, he knew that something terrible was happening. His father was gray and sweating, and his older brother looked scared. He'd never seen his older brother look scared before. And his brother said to him, "Mark, call 911." And before he could get up off the rug, a voice that he could barely remember, a voice he hadn't heard in years, said, "Don't call 911, son. Tell your mother that I love her. Tell her that I am all right." And then his father died right there in the living room. Now, in that day, if you died and you weren't under active medical care, you had to have an autopsy because there was foul play, was there a possibility? And at autopsy, his father's brain was absolutely destroyed. There was nothing that even looked like brain inside of his father's skull. And so he was left with a question. Who spoke? And he says nothing he's ever read in any medical journal or textbook has brought him closer to the answer to this question. But the question itself changed him. The question was a gift. It changed the way he sees his work, the way he sees himself, the way he sees life. It allows him to wonder and to know that all knowledge is only provisional, and life may be far different than we suspect it to be. This can be stressful, even frightening to realize this. The first word an angel says in the Bible when it appears to a human being, remember what it is? Be not afraid. Be not afraid. And that's the advice of this workshop. Be not afraid. Befriend the unknown. Claim again for yourself a sense of wonder and awe and aliveness. People who wonder do not burn out. And accept the great gift of mystery, which very often is hope. Yeah. So that's what I wanted to say. And Franco, your thoughts?
Of yours that I'd love to invite, but let's see. Anyway, Rachel, I love those stories, and there are others that I hope you'll share. I know some of these stories, but I love what you said in the beginning about seeing. That the mystery isn't somewhere else, right? It's not separate or different than our everyday world, but rather it's hidden in the ordinary, we could say sometimes. And I know from my experience of being with dying, as you do as well, that dying is a kind of stripping away process, right? It exposes the truth that was already there. in a certain way. It makes it evident in the room, as our identities fall away and our roles fall away. Somehow mystery is uncovered in a certain way. Yeah, yeah. Beautiful. Yeah. I want to engage our participants. I want to get them involved in a way. And so we had in mind this little writing exercise. And you said something, maybe kind of like you said to those doctors in that gathering that you were part of. Let's get them involved. Can you help us?
Great
Can you
idea.
guide us?
Yeah.
Oh, wait. Well, there's something before we start that, which is, we were talking earlier about our different traditions. I come from this tradition of Buddhism. Tell people about your grandfather.
My grandfather was an Orthodox rabbi, and all of his children were medical scientists and deans of medical schools and nursing schools. And he was like an island of mysticism in this sea of cognition. And they didn't think of him, they were embarrassed by him, actually. Embarrassed by the Kabbalah, which he read every day. And so he needed somebody to talk to. And fortunately, I was it. He was the most important person in my life as a child.
Oh.
And so much so that when he died, my parents were very frightened for me. They were worried. And then weeks went by and I didn't mention, I was 7, and I didn't mention a word about him. And my mother talked to a psychiatrist. And the psychiatrist said, don't bring the subject up, she'll bring it up. And I didn't. And then after about 3 months, my mother said to me, do you miss Grandpa? And I said, oh no. And she said, well, how come? And I said, well, now I can take him to school with me. And I talked to him.
Beautiful.
Until I was about 10. Yeah. Yeah.
Beautiful, Rachel. Hey, one non-mystical thing. Can you bring your computer a little closer to you, or your microphone a little closer to you?
I'm bringing myself a little closer to my computer and my microphone.
Yeah, that's good. So
How
people
is
can
that?
hear you better. Maybe
Is
hear you a
that
little bit
better?
better. Yeah, that's a little bit better. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. And also, if you have anything on your computer like papers and stuff, it makes a very loud rustly sound. So just please avoid kind of anything on your computer. Great. Thanks so much.
So Rachel, you said that medicine gives you a frontline view into mystery. I love that. And I wonder if you could speak from your experience, your direct experience of an experience where you were being the doctor and mystery entered into the experience, maybe even entered into a choice that you made about treating a particular patient. Like I know you've shared with me that story of the mother saying something's wrong with my child.
Oh yeah. Now that's a fairly long story. Are you up for it?
Do the Reader's Digest version.
I'll do my best. Yeah. Well, this happened when I was a brand new doctor. And I was a brand new doctor at a time when I was the only woman on the pediatric house staff. So that I was the woman, and I was not very welcome there. And so I had to be very careful. I had to not make any mistakes. I was the guest that wasn't invited to the party, if you will, but I was at the party. And so the first place that I was assigned at the beginning of my training as a pediatrician was the worst possible place to be, which was the pediatric emergency room. And if you worked the emergency room in that day, you showed up and you didn't go home until the end of your assignment, which was 2 months down the line. And all the doctors slept together in one big room. And I was a woman, they were men, this was not acceptable. So for 2 months, I slept on a gurney, a stretcher in the corridor, fully dressed, right? And I was sleeping there maybe the second week of this rotation. And the front desk came to wake me up and said, "There's a crazy woman here." I said, "A crazy woman?" She said, "Yes, a crazy woman with a little boy. Oh, I put him in a room, go see him." And then she walked away. And I said, "Why is she crazy?" And she didn't answer me. So I went to the examining room and I opened the door, and there's a woman with a 2-year-old who's running around the room, and he's looking in the trash can, and he's full of life and energy. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. She is white as a sheet. And she says to me, as soon as she sees me, she says to me, "Doctor, my baby's going to die. You've got to do something. My baby's going to die." And I look at her, and she's obviously very sincere. I look at the little boy. So I pick him up and get him on the table and examine him. And the only thing I can find on examination is that his breathing a little fast, but that's it. But then again, he's been running around. And I say, okay, I guess I should do the standard workup. I'm such a new doctor, I'm not quite sure what to do with this. And I do, and I order the blood work and the cultures and the x-rays and all of this. They all normal. So I go back there with the information, and I say to her, everything's normal, you can go home. And she becomes hysterical. And she says, "My baby's going to die. And I say, "Okay, I'll be right back." And I go outside and I say, "I got to call the chief resident. I don't know what to do." Right. So I call the chief resident. He wakes up and he is hostile. I mean, what? You call me for something like this? For God's sake, send her home. She's crazy and you're crazy too. Right. So I hang up the phone and I go back to give her the news that the chief resident says she should go home. And when I do this, she completely breaks down. And she puts her hand out and touches me on the arm. And she says, "Help me, doctor, my baby's going to die." And I look into her face and suddenly I know she's right. I know it as much as I know anything that's in that room. I know she's right. Okay? So I explained to her there's one test we haven't done yet. It's called a lumbar puncture. And I'll take some of the baby's spinal fluid and we'll see if there's anything wrong there. Are you giving me permission to do that? She says, "Please, doctor." So I go out to the nurses' station. The nurses, and ask for the LP, the lumbar puncture pack. And I asked for one of them to come and help me. And their faces are, their eyes roll, right? But I'm still a doctor, even though I'm a woman. And so somebody volunteers, and they come back to the room. We set the baby up on the table. I open the pack, put the gloves on, the whole thing. And you do this with a needle, a long needle, and it has a stylet that closes it. You have to pull this thing out to connect to the spinal fluid, right? And I'm doing this. I just barely get in. I can feel the click. That means that I am in the right place. And I'm about to pull the stylet out, and the door of the examining room opens with such force that it hits the wall. And it's my chief resident. His face is so red, he can barely talk. He says, "What the hell are you doing?" He starts shouting at me. And I say to myself, I just got in there. I just knew that I'm there. I might as well pull the stylet out. So I pull the stylet out, freeing the needle, right? And turn to him to respond to his shouting. And suddenly he stops shouting. And he's looking at my hands. And I turn back just in time to see the first drop of pus come through the needle. The baby had meningitis, meningococcal meningitis. If I had sent him home, chances are he would have been dead in 2 to 3 hours. So then we all turn back into doctors, right? And we do everything we need to do. We hook the baby up to the IV. She's taken up to the pediatric ICU. And my chief resident takes me to the cafeteria for a cup of coffee. And we're sitting opposite the coffee. And he said, you told me you saw the rapid breathing. And I said, yeah, I did. He said, great pickup. I said, great pickup. You're a great diagnostician. And I didn't say a word. But just that experience, I think, has changed the way I care for mothers and children, and the way I pay attention to what a mother can know about the life that she has brought into the world.
Mm,
And
beautiful.
it has made a huge difference. Sometimes it has been life-saving, just like this.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful story, Rachel. I mean, when it comes to these things, the great matters of life and death, our conventional knowing can only take us so far, right? And it's important to contextualize, I think, that knowing, in the vastness of all there is to know, it's good not to overestimate our knowing. Yeah.
There's a
That's,
difference between knowing and proving,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And they are two completely different functions.
yeah.
One's very cognitive, the other is completely experiential.
I like what you're saying about how mysteries in the everyday, in the ordinary. It doesn't have to be some big glamorous things with bells and whistles going off, and bright lights.
It often isn't, right?
Right. So let's explore that with the group. Let's explore that with the group. Maybe you can guide them through a really brief writing practice, just for 5 or 7 minutes, something like that.
Sure. Let's start. I understand that most of you probably know how to write on your computer. I don't. So if you don't, um, pencil and paper, pen and paper, something to write on briefly. Okay, just gather it up, take a minute. Some of you write on, some of you write with. You make yourself comfortable. I assume you're sitting somewhere like I am. Just settle down for a moment in your chair, and let's start by noticing our breath. Just notice your breath coming and going in you. And put your attention on your out breath. Notice how easily you let go of what is old and used up and no longer supports your life. Notice the ease with which you breathe out. And then notice the ease with which you breathe in, with which you welcome the new, the fresh, the unknown, the life. And notice this little mantra, breathing out what is used up and old, welcoming what is fresh and life affirming. All life depends on this little mantra. And now, just allow yourself to remember a time when something happened that you couldn't explain or even understand, but it happened anyway. It doesn't have to be something big, it could be something small, like knowing who's going to call before you pick up the phone, who's on the phone before you pick it up, or anything small or something big. Remember a time when something happened you couldn't explain. And take a moment and just in a few sentences, write down what happened. Write down what happened. And let me ask you a few questions about it. did you respond? Were you surprised or not? How did you explain this to yourself, or did you explain it at all? Make a note or two. And if you had any questions, if there was something that you wondered about, what were those questions? What were you wondering about? Write those down too. And did you tell anyone about it? Did you share it with anybody or not? And if you shared it, who did you share it with? And if you didn't share it, how come? And one last question. How long ago did this thing happen? What you're writing about? How long ago did this thing happen? How long have you remembered it? Do you have any idea about why you remembered it? What part of yourself did not forget it? You just write that down too. Look over what you've written and be sure there's nothing else you want to write down. Be sure you've written down anything that you've wondered about, even things that you wondered about just now that you hadn't wondered about before, about this happening. People who wonder tend not to burn out, you know. And let your writing come to a close. And Franco, do you want to take it to the next step?
Let's just do this. If you're willing to share a little bit about what your notes that you just wrote about and what you discovered in the writing of it, maybe what you wondered about in the writing of it, that would be wonderful. And we'd like to hear from you. So you just do that by digitally raising your hand. If on the lower part of your screen, you'll see a button that says reactions. You can, depending on your version of Zoom, reactions is a little raise hand notion. And if not, it's under the more icon. So let's see, it looks like we've got some people who raised their hands already. Noah, I'm going to let you call
Okay.
on
Marcy.
Marcy, okay.
I need to unmute.
Yeah, you're unmuted.
Oh, okay. Thank you. So when I was working in hospice, there were a few times that I saw family members of my patients that had passed who came to help their loved ones to the finish line of their life. And I could see them very clearly. Usually it was just a flash. And for me, I responded by being present, and then when possible, confirming it with family members. Like, what did her mother look like? I'm just curious, it happened with a friend's mother, and I could confirm that it was her favorite brother because of the hat that I saw that he was wearing. And it wasn't an experience that I could share with the family because I was there as a professional and didn't want to change that relationship. I needed them to trust me through the end of life. But I did share it with people that I knew had mystical experiences and were open to this. And it happened it was about 10 years ago. And for me, it was a real confirmation of that mystery and of how little I really do know. And Rachel, I didn't hear the other question. There was another question in there that I didn't hear, but that was my experience.
And Marcy, when you were writing it down, remembering this, what happened for you? Just how, what was your relationship to it when you were writing it down?
I could feel my heart open.
Uh-huh.
I felt my body relax. I was back there. It was such a beautiful experience to be privileged to witness that. And it was maybe 3-4 times that it happened. And it was always a flash.
Mm-hmm.
But I knew what it was. I had that inner knowing.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Having gone through meta helped a lot.
Yeah. Beautiful. Good. Well, we I don't know if you have any other comments on this, Rachel, but I kind of want to hear some of these. Beautiful
memory. Yeah.
And as some of these are being shared, I want to encourage everybody to enter with a kind of don't know mind, and to see what happens if you open up a little bit, if you let your mind expand, and see what your responses are to people's sharings. Okay, somebody else now. Let's choose someone else.
Liz, please.
Thank you.
Sorry, Liz, to interrupt you. I just want to encourage us to go to essence as much as possible. Go to the most important thing to say with it. We don't necessarily need every aspect of the story, but go to what's most important. Thank you.
Okay, I'll just read what I wrote so that I do stick to the essence. I had the experience actually of being shot, in that I experienced what someone who I was or am deeply in love with experienced when he was shot. And I felt the bullet enter under my arm and pass across my body through my lungs. And it felt like a bee sting, only about 1,000 times worse. And I kind of fell on the ground. And then in my mind, I heard the word zipped. And that didn't mean anything to me, but I later on learned that that's a slang term that soldiers use to refer to getting shot. And he was a soldier.
Beautiful. Yeah. So these are extraordinary experiences like the one you're describing, Liz, and that Marcy described as well. Yeah. These happen to people and they're unexplainable. Yeah. All right, let's get one or two more as time permits. Noah?
Susan, please.
Susan Carey, yeah.
Susan, go ahead. You're unmuted. Yeah, you can speak.
Hi. I didn't expect to be doing this. I live in Florida and I work with people on death row and with their families. And there was an occasion about 25 years ago where we've had a lot of executions here. And I had always said that I would not witness because I was concerned a lot about what that would do to me, carrying on my work of accompanying people, but how much was I really called upon by the universe to do? But it became clear with this one person that I could stay with him and distinguish between death and killing. And there is a big difference. So as they were strapping him into the electric chair, and we had agreed that only as long as we could keep eye contact would I continue to watch. And there was a time when they were strapping him into the electric chair and doing all their, well, it's pretty medieval.
Doing their preparations, yeah.
Doing their preparations. And I kept feeling like there was some kind of energy around his left shoulder, which I could not explain. I just sensed that there was movement there. I couldn't see it. And when they put the hood over his face, I lowered my eyes, but I could still sense whatever this was. And after he died, and I had come back home to now deal with the killing aspect, and I was doing stuff with crayons, just trying to get it out. It was angels. It was very clear that at that point that he had been surrounded by angels during that time.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes the experience of mystery may have a quality of extraordinariness to it. And sometimes it's very ordinary. You know, it's just, as Rachel said, you know who's about to call you before the phone rings. Yeah. Yeah. I was leading a retreat for men and women with AIDS years ago. And we were doing a Gestalt writing exercise where you would write to someone who you maybe had some challenges with, and then you would put the pen down and you pick it up again and you'd write a response as if that person was responding to you. And this one man was writing to his father who had, they had a terrible relationship. His father had disowned him because of his HIV status. And he just thought this was the most useless exercise you could imagine. And I said, well, just try it, you know? And he kept writing, but he didn't have any confidence in it at all. Anyway, the workshop ended and he went home and everybody went home. And a day or so later, he called me. And he said, I got something in the mail today. I said, you did? What did you get? He said, I got a letter from my father, the one I was writing to in the Gestalt exercise. I said, well, did you send him what you wrote? He said, no, I didn't do that. I said, well, what did the letter say? And he said, well, it only had a few words in it. I said, well, what were the words? And the words were, please forgive me. And this young man with HIV and his father hadn't spoken in many years. And that was the letter he got. So I'm saying these things not to have some woo-woo experience, but to say that mystery is right there in our everyday lives. It's often part of our experience, you know. And often when the experience of mystery occurs, we see in a new way, and we sometimes appreciate time in a new way even. The future doesn't exist. We're pulled into the present moment in a very direct and immediate way. And often when we're beyond the tyranny of time, there's no fear. And I've been with people at the end of their lives many times when they stepped out of the tyranny of time in a way, and there was no fear of dying. And when there's no fear, often there is the presence of love. And what I've seen many times is that love is the kind of lubricant, if you will, that allows people to slip out of their bodies gracefully without struggle. Okay, let's take one or two more. We have to be a little mindful of time, but let's take a few more. Noah? Ada.
Hello. I knew exactly when somebody called me that what she was going to tell me, and it was about the death of a school friend. She had passed away very suddenly from a cerebral aneurysm. And I was about 15 or 16 years old, so this happened about 40 years ago. And I still remember this feeling I had, this sensation which was really weird, that I knew somebody was going to tell me that somebody had passed away. I never told this to anybody because I had the feeling that I couldn't make myself clear and it was too weird. But I still remember it, and I still can recall the feeling, the sensation I had in my body.
And Ada, as you tell it to us now,
Yeah.
Is this the first time you're sharing it?
I think so. I'm not quite sure, but I think it's the first time
And
I
so
ever.
what's happening for you now as you start to speak about it?
Yeah, it reminds me of, I've been working in palliative care for children. It reminds me of all the children I've seen and seen passing away, and about the mystery which can be found there, especially the children who want to be alone, who send their parents out of the room. Please go, I want to be alone, I can see the angels, and then they pass away.
Yeah.
There's a connection there somewhere.
Yeah. So what's the quality in your own heart and mind right now?
It's very open.
Very open.
Very warm.
Anything else? Yeah. Warm.
Warm in my extremities.
Yeah. And what do you notice in your mind?
Some shakiness, but that might be because I'm speaking here to everybody.
Yeah. All right.
And a sense of mystery and awe and wonder, and some kind of joy, actually.
Yeah.
Some kind of happiness to be alive, to experience this mystery.
Yeah. Beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah. Often joy is the kind of doorway, right? Or curiosity, I should say, first is the doorway to joy. Yeah. And then joy opens us to something else again. I often say that love is the fuel on this journey through life and death, but joy is the spark that ignites the fuel. Yeah. And curiosity is a great quality. So I'm wondering if that's part of your experience now, kind of curiosity.
It is. Definitely, yeah.
Wonderful.
And joy is so close to sadness, isn't it? It's really
sometimes.
Not always, that's true, but it's very often right next, they are right next to each other.
Yeah, but I'm mostly interested in what's happening for you right now. Yeah, right now. We forget about, we won't have to philosophize about curiosity or joy. Just right now, it's here, isn't it?
Yeah. It is here, yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful. All right, Noah, let's include someone else.
Hello.
Jean? Yeah.
Well, the fact that I just got unmuted has been one of those amazing things, similar to this, like knowing might happen. Weird, just weird. But my experience I wrote about, and I want to say hello to Rachel, who I feel so fortunate to have gotten to see a couple of times. I'm in Memphis, Tennessee. It happened in 1994, 1 month after my mother died of ovarian cancer from an illness that was everything that was not palliative care or hospice. And I was driving down a very busy interstate at rush hour, and alone behind, my car hit the guardrail and it began to spin out of control. And as I tried to hold on to my wheel to straighten it, I realized every time I tried to correct it, it just spun it harder, more and more out of control. So finally, I just held on to my steering wheel and just like in an amusement park or something, just waited for the ride to stop. But I knew that there were 3 lanes of traffic coming at full speed behind me, and I was going to be hit. It was just a matter of when. And I kept spinning and kept spinning. And I don't know how long it went on. It was like not time. And I heard these voices from the back seat. There were 3 of them in the back seat talking. And they were angels. And they were saying how much trouble it was to watch out for me because I was taking all these risks and I was not careful. And they were really complaining about how hard it was to keep me alive or something. And then finally my car slowed from the spinning and I hadn't been hit. I mean, when it started spinning, there was bumper to bumper traffic going at 75 miles an hour.
Right.
And so then I pulled my car. When I realized the engine still worked, I was close to an exit and I drove off the exit. Somebody drove up the exit ramp behind me, knowing I was in some distress, having witnessed what happened. And I got out of my car. He said, "Are you okay?" I said, "Yes." And he said, "Can I help you?" I said, "Well, I'm really late to a birthday party." And he drove me on to the birthday party. I got out and went to the birthday party. And people said to me there, "You mean you got in the car with a stranger?" It was like, that was the least of it at that point.
Yeah.
But, and just now, when you say, so what's the experience now?
What's it like right now, Jeannie, as you're describing this?
As I realized, as I was writing this, I've thought about it a lot. I've talked about it some. I thought about it, the proximity to my mother's death. And it's never happened before or after. My mother was a strong, fierce woman who showed her love through action. She was not huggy. It wasn't an emotive kind of love, but I have this sense of her love and her empowerment in my life right now that's very strong. And I'm very grateful for.
So you felt her love. You really felt her love. Yeah, beautiful. And when you were describing this, when you were writing it down, you could feel it again. Yeah.
As I reflected on writing.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. Yeah. You know, Rachel, I'm wondering here with you a little bit. And, you know, one of the things that mystery does for me, and I wonder if it's so for you, is, you know, it helps me to realize that this person right in front of me, this patient, if you will, or this situation that I'm finding myself in, I've never had it before. It's fresh and alive, and it's here in a way for the first time. And several people have mentioned this a little bit, how, you know, it brings us into contact with the immediacy of life. And I wonder if there's anything you want to say about that, Rachel.
Well, as a pediatrician, it brings us into contact with child mind, where everything is new. And things have never happened before. Even when you walk into the Safeway in your neighborhood, that never happened before.
Yeah.
You may have been in the Safeway before, but this time has never happened before.
Right.
And that's part of having the eyes to see. To be willing to see that something new is happening and show up for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that you necessarily have to leave behind your training in your case as a physician.
Well, you got to free yourself of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because your training is really about training your eyes.
Yeah.
It's as much training your eyes not to see as it is training them to see. And you need to get beginner's eyes again. And the eyes that were given to you to see everything and to wonder, the same way a little child does.
So this requires of us, if you will, that we relax our knowing. Yeah. And often that knowing is tied up in our self-image, right? You know, we have an idea of who we are, and we hold on to it.
Well, as they say, knowledge is power. I don't think it is. Knowledge is knowledge.
Knowledge is knowledge.
Power is different than that.
One of the things that happens in meditation practice is we watch how we hold on to our sense of self, our self-image, we could call it, yeah. And how this can relax a little bit. And when it relaxes, we can step into the unknown a little bit more freely, if you will, or gracefully, if you will. Yeah. But
Well,
when we're,
just the basic realization, nothing has ever happened before.
yeah,
Nothing
yeah,
has ever happened before.
right,
Everything that we encounter is new.
yeah. So not knowing is not the opposite of knowing, right?
No, it's more about curiosity
Uh-huh.
than
Yeah,
about knowing or not knowing. It's about
yeah,
like, huh? What's happening? Wow.
yeah. You know, Allen Ginsberg, great poet and also Buddhist practitioner, he said when you're in meditation, there's only one label you really have to use in meditation. Some people use labeling as a way to practice. And he said the only label you need is wow.
That's
Wow.
mine.
Yeah,
That's my label.
that's the only one you really need. Yeah, yeah,
You know how interesting, how very profound things can happen, how we don't notice it. You know, there's a thing with small children, if there's a difficulty in fusing their vision, their right eye with their left eye, they will suppress the vision in one eye. And they suppress it so totally that it cannot be recovered. This is a healthy eye that is blind. In order to make cognitive sense of something, they have lost the vision of one eye. And I think it's a metaphor for what we're talking about. We've lost the vision, the ability to see a part of the world, the capacity we're born with to see and to wonder.
yeah,
And we have to try and recover it, I think.
yeah.
Mhm.
Rachel, these are such beautiful metaphors, and I apologize, but so many people are asking me to see if we can make your audio louder. They're having a really hard time
I
hearing you.
can't, I don't know. Gee, I'm so sorry. Well, okay, how's that? Now you're going to be very loud.
It's the same because if you just turn up your speakers, it doesn't change it. Yeah. We could try to can you go into
Any
the
thoughts?
Zoom preferences? If you go to zoom.us in the
I'm very
upper
close
left,
to my screen.
it might just be your audio settings. So here, try this next to do you see the little
I can't
microphone?
hear you at all. I can't hear you.
Oh, you can't hear me now? Can you hear me, Frank?
No.
Yes, I can hear you fine.
Okay. Can you hear us now, Rachel?
Yes.
Okay. So on the mute button, next to the mute button, you see that little upper arrow. If you click that on the lower left of your screen,
Got it.
and then click audio settings.
Click audio settings, same as system.
And then on microphone,
Wait, I don't have audio settings in when I click the little up arrow.
oh, it's all the way at the bottom of that.
Oh, here it is. Yes.
Yeah.
Clicked it.
Okay. Okay, great. And then click on audio, or it's there in audio. Now, next to where it says, you see where it says microphone? It's the second kind of
Yeah, I got it.
thing. Then does it say automatically adjust microphone volume?
Yes.
So
Check.
uncheck it,
Uncheck.
and then move the input volume all the way to the right. Let's see if that helps.
Did that help?
So now it's all the way up.
Yeah.
Okay, say
Output.
something now. For
Pardon?
the microphone. For the microphone, yeah. Not the output volume, but the microphone volume.
Yes, it's all the way up to the right. Input volume is all the way up to the right.
Okay. I think it's a little better.
Is it?
What do you think, Frank?
Yeah, especially as you're closer to it. That helps.
Okay, that helps too.
Now I
Okay.
hear you guys very loud.
Okay.
And-
That's all the time we'll take for this, but we so appreciate that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. So, Rachel, you know, our binary thinking, if you will, our discursive mind, if you will, it, our purposeful intelligence, it has a place, right? It has a place in our lives. It's just that, and we should exercise it well, I think, but maybe to also understand that it isn't the only way of knowing. Yeah.
There's a difference between knowledge and wisdom, of course. And yeah, it does have a place, but it doesn't have all the space that is available.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think we feel unsafe. We want to know things in order to control things, in order to somehow to keep ourselves safer. You know, knowledge is power, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think knowledge is power. I think power is power. It's different than that.
Yeah. Maybe wisdom is power.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. We have just a few minutes before we have to close here. And I'm wondering if there's anything else you might like to add, Rachel, about anything that's been brought up from the audience or with a group of people here, or anything else that you want to add?
It's about how to live well, really. You know, living a profound and satisfying life, you know, it's not about having answers. It's not about having all the answers. That living well, in my experience, is not about having any answers at all. It's much more about pursuing unanswerable questions in good company. Like you, Franco.
Yeah, I mean, I, you know, in a very pragmatic way, I think that, for example, when I'm with people who are dying, sometimes it's really hard to stay in the room, honestly. It's hard to stay in the room and be present for unanswerable questions. Yeah. But that's when it really, for me, that's when the real work begins, to stay in the room with unanswerable questions. Yeah. And remain present. That's part of the work, I think, in being with dying. Yeah.
Well, as you know, I've done a lot of work with dying people as well, but mostly psychological work. And I don't want answers. I find it very comforting to be in the room without answers. I feel very close to people and very privileged to be witnessing and being taken along. I feel the intimacy of it.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful. I'm just grateful.
Well, I'm grateful for you, old friend. Really grateful for our longtime friendship and for your willingness to be here today and to wonder together and to share that with the audience. And you know, we should have 3 days to do this, Rachel. Really, there's so much to explore.
Yeah.
But you know, respecting our time, we have to come to a close here. And before we close, I have to put a word in for Upaya, because you know, Upaya is just a precious jewel in the world right now. And what Roshi Joan is doing and what Upaya is doing to, you know, bring these kinds of programs out to the world is just precious to me, really precious. And so it's worthy of our investment. Yeah. In the Buddhist community, we speak of dana, you know, or freely offered generosity. Generosity comes with no strings. Yeah. It's just given directly from the heart. Yeah. And it's meant to stretch us. It's meant to stretch us. Generosity is meant to stretch us, to help us go past our normal, habitual, familiar ways of being in the world. So I really want to encourage everybody on this call to stretch, really stretch, please stretch, and make a gift to Upaya that will enable these kinds of programs to continue. And then maybe Rachel and I will come back and we'll do a much longer program and we'll have more time to explore this. But right now, this is what's important, is to express your generosity as freely as you can, as your means will allow, and to allow Upaya to continue. I'm ever grateful for Upaya, and I want to support it. So please join me in supporting it. Yeah. So that's essential. And I know that Roshi Joan's been hanging out here, and I wonder if You want to come on and say anything, Roshi, before we close here in just a minute? Are you still here, Roshi?
I'm here.
Oh, good.
And I just, I think my only thing is I wanted to hear from every person who raised their hand.
Yes, us too.
Stories that were shared were extraordinary. And my deep gratitude to you and Rachel. Truly, so much love. Thank you so much.
Yeah. And yeah, just in closing, you know, I want to encourage us all to walk through this world with a don't know mind. Yeah. A mind that's not so fixed, that has a quality of curiosity and wonder about it. You know, one of the teachers I worked with one time, she said to me, Franco, can you let go of your history and step into the mystery? Yeah. And that's really what I want to encourage us to do, to step into this world, this everyday world, our ordinary world, with a sense of wonder, not knowing, so we're not too fixed in the way in which we meet the world. So thank you for listening. I wish we had more time to listen to everyone, but I'm very grateful to have done this with you, Rachel, and we'll come back perhaps and do a much longer one where we can explore still deeper.
Love you, Frank.
Thank you. So this world we live in, it's a world of mystery. It's a world of mystery. And it's not that we can't know anything about it, it's that the discovery is endless, actually. It's endless. It's an inexhaustible mystery. Yeah. So thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Upaya. Thank you, Noah, for steering us through this. And thank you, everybody who's participated. We're incredibly grateful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Frank, and thank you so much, Rachel. We definitely will have to have you back for a longer session. So many people are writing me, requesting that. And just so everyone knows, we will post the recording of this on the resource page, and I'll do a little editing on the audio to boost the levels, so everything should be clearer, and also the transcript will be there. And if you want to share it with your friends, you can go ahead and they can register for the program just like you did and have access to the recording. We just ask that you not share the recording directly, but just so that they can come to our resource page, which is right here. Okay, thank you all so much, and thank you for your practice.
Big, big love. Thank you.
And thank you so much to Claudia for doing the Italian interpretation this whole time.
Thank you, Noah, for mentioning that. Yeah. We'll just stay on for a second, Rachel.